The African savanna stretches before you, an ocean of golden grass beneath the merciless sun. A figure moves through the landscape, not quite human, not quite ape. Its gait is deliberate, almost cautious, yet there's something in its eyes, a flicker of something beyond instinct. 2 million years ago, our ancestors stood at a crossroads that would forever alter the trajectory of life on Earth. The spark that separated us from every other species was quietly igniting, a profound transformation occurring in near silence across thousands of generations. This is not merely a story of bones and stones, though we'll examine plenty of those. This is the story of when thinking itself changed, when instinct began its long, faltering evolution into something we now call intelligence. Welcome to a journey through time, to an era when the first glimmers of human consciousness were taking shape in creatures that walked upright but were not yet us. Their brains were expanding, their hands were crafting tools, and their minds were beginning to contemplate their world. How did this happen? What cosmic alignment of circumstances allowed one branch of primates to develop the cognitive abilities that would eventually produce Shakespeare, Einstein, and the device you're watching this on? The answer lies buried in the ancient soils of East Africa. Imagine standing among a small band of early hominins, perhaps Homo habilis or early Homo erectus, as they navigate their world. What do you see in their faces, in their actions? What thoughts, if any, stir behind those prominent brow ridges? The traditional narrative suggests a gradual, almost inevitable evolution toward higher intelligence, a neat, linear progression from primitive to advanced. But the fossil and archaeological evidence tells a more complex, more intriguing story, one of fits and starts, of accidents and opportunities. Our journey begins 2 million years ago, because this is when something remarkable appears in the archaeological record, something that suggests a fundamental shift in cognitive capabilities. The first evidence of abstract thinking, the ability to contemplate things that aren't physically present. This is the moment when instinct became something more, when stimulus and response began to separate, creating a space where imagination could grow. A new kind of mind was emerging, one that would eventually ask not just what, but why and how and what if. Tonight, we'll examine the evidence for this pivotal transition. We'll look at stone tools that reveal cognitive strategies, fossil skulls that show expanding brain capacity, and environmental pressures that may have sparked this intellectual revolution. But more importantly, we'll contemplate what it means to become conscious. By the way, have you ever wondered what your mind would be like if you lived 2 million years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments. It's fascinating to imagine how differently we might perceive the world. The question at the heart of our exploration is deceptively simple. When and how did we begin to think like humans? When did our ancestors first experience something we might recognize as consciousness? And what sparked this profound transformation? The answer matters because it speaks to the very essence of what makes us human. It challenges us to reconsider not just our past, but our present and our future, our very understanding of what it means to be a thinking being on this planet. Some scientists argue that language was the catalyst, that the ability to communicate complex ideas fundamentally rewired our neural architecture. Others suggest that tool use came first, creating selection pressures that favored problem-solving minds. The debate continues with evidence supporting multiple interpretations. But perhaps the most fascinating possibility is that consciousness itself was an evolutionary accident, a side effect of adaptations selected for entirely different reasons. What if being human was never the goal at all? What if awareness was simply a quirk of neural complexity? As the sun sets over the ancient savanna in our mind's eye, we watch our distant ancestors gather around a fire, one of the first controlled uses of this transformative element. The flames cast shadows across their faces, illuminating expressions that might contain the first stirrings of wonder. They don't yet have words for the stars above them or the thoughts within them. They cannot contemplate their place in history or imagine their descendants watching documentaries about their lives. But something is awakening in their minds, something that will change everything. This is the story of Life 2.0, when the natural programming of instinct began to be overwritten by something new, the ability to rewrite our own programming. It's the story of how nature's automation gave way to imagination, how reaction evolved into contemplation. Over the next hour, we'll walk with these early humans, examine the tools they left behind and reconstruct the world they inhabited. We'll follow the evidence from multiple disciplines, paleoanthropology, archaeology, genetics, and neuroscience, to piece together this crucial chapter in our shared story. It's a tale filled with mysteries and unanswered questions, a narrative where the lines between fact and speculation often blur. But it's also a story grounded in physical evidence, in the tangible remnants of lives lived eons ago. So join me as we journey back to witness the birth of the human mind, the moment when our ancestors first began to think about thinking itself, when instinct became intelligence. Chapter 2. The Cognitive Revolution's Mysteries. 2 million years ago, something unprecedented was occurring in the minds of certain primates. It wasn't visible to the naked eye. It left no direct fossil evidence, yet it represents perhaps the most significant transformation in the history of life on this planet. The emergence of human-like intelligence changed everything, not just for our species, but for every organism with whom we share this world. Unlike other evolutionary adaptations, sharper claws, stronger muscles, more efficient digestion, intelligence proved to be something entirely different, something with no upper limit. Other adaptations reached natural equilibrium. Cheetahs became fast enough to catch gazelles, but not faster. The energy cost would outweigh the benefit. Giraffes grew tall enough to reach high foliage, but not taller. The cardiac demands would be unsustainable. Intelligence, however, once sparked, seemed to feed on itself. This is our central mystery. What enabled this cognitive takeoff? What combination of environmental pressures, genetic mutations, and cultural developments allowed one species to develop the mental capacity to eventually dominate every ecosystem on Earth? To alter the very chemistry of the atmosphere and geology of the planet? The stakes of this inquiry couldn't be higher. Understanding the origins of human intelligence isn't merely an academic exercise, it's essential to comprehending our present predicament. If we can identify what made us uniquely human, perhaps we can better understand our strengths, our limitations, and our future. Consider the magnitude of the transition. In evolutionary terms, it happened in an instant. From simple stone tools to quantum physics in less than 2 million years, a mere blink in the 3.8 billion year history of life. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Nothing has happened since. What makes this question so compelling is that intelligence itself is investigating its own origins. We are, the universe, becomes self-aware, using the very capacity we're studying to understand how that capacity came to be. There's a beautiful recursion in this inquiry, a mirror facing a mirror. Scientists have proposed numerous theories to explain this cognitive revolution. Climate change may have created selection pressures favoring adaptability over specialization. Social complexity might have driven the need for enhanced communication and theory of mind. Tool use could have created a feedback loop between hand and brain development. But none of these theories fully explains the extraordinary trajectory that followed. Many species experience climate change. Many live in complex social groups. Some even use simple tools. Yet only one developed the capacity to contemplate its own existence, create art, build civilizations, and eventually leave its home planet. This mystery deepens when we consider that increased intelligence didn't immediately confer overwhelming survival advantages. For hundreds of thousands of years, our increasingly intelligent ancestors remained vulnerable predator targets, subject to disease, starvation, and all the harsh realities of prehistoric life. If you could travel back and observe these early humans, what would surprise you most? Their similarities to us or their differences? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. The fossil record tells us that brain size increased dramatically during this period. Homo habilis had a brain volume of around 600 cubic centimeters. Early Homo erectus reached 850 cubic centimeters. For comparison, modern humans average about 1,350 cubic centimeters. Something was clearly driving rapid neural evolution. But brain size alone doesn't explain everything. Neanderthals had slightly larger brains than modern humans, yet it was our species that developed more complex cultures and technologies. The quality of neural connections, the organization of thought, must have mattered as much as raw brain volume. The implications of our inquiry extend beyond anthropology. If we can understand how intelligence naturally evolved once, we gain insight into how it might evolve again, either in other species or in the artificial systems we're currently developing. The parallels between biological and artificial intelligence are striking. Both rely on pattern recognition. Both learn through trial and error. Both become more capable through iterative improvement. But whether artificial intelligence will follow a similar trajectory, from simple task performance to self-awareness, remains one of the most profound questions of our time. The stakes also extend to our search for extraterrestrial intelligence. If the emergence of human-like consciousness required a highly specific set of circumstances, a perfect storm of environmental conditions, genetic mutations, and cultural developments, then similar intelligence might be vanishingly rare in the universe. Conversely, if intelligence represents a natural evolutionary outcome under certain common conditions, the cosmos might be teeming with thinking beings. Our understanding of ourselves thus shapes our expectations about what or who might exist among the stars. Perhaps most profoundly, this investigation challenges us to consider what we truly value about being human. Is it our rationality, our creativity, our capacity for empathy and moral reasoning? By identifying when and how these traits emerged, we confront questions about what makes life meaningful. These are not merely philosophical musings. As we gain the technological capacity to potentially alter our own cognitive evolution through genetic engineering, neural implants, and human-machine interfaces, understanding our cognitive origins becomes essential to making wise choices about our cognitive future. What if the spark of human intelligence was essentially accidental, a genetic mutation that happened to confer advantages in a specific environment at a specific time? Would that make our existence more miraculous or more mundane? Would it change how we see our place in the natural order? Or what if intelligence was somehow inevitable, the natural outcome of evolutionary processes operating over sufficient time? Would that suggest that the universe itself has some inherent tendency toward consciousness, that awareness is somehow woven into the fabric of reality? These questions may seem abstract, but they have concrete implications for how we approach everything, from education to artificial intelligence development to space exploration. Our origin story shapes our destiny in ways both subtle and profound. As we delve into the evidence from this pivotal period 2 million years ago, we're not just looking at ancient history. We're exploring the birth of possibility itself, the moment when, for the first time in Earth's long history, a species gained the capacity to imagine alternatives, to envision futures that didn't yet exist. This might be the most consequential transition in our planet's history, more significant than the development of multicellular life or the conquest of land. Because with human intelligence came something unprecedented, the ability to transcend biological evolution through cultural evolution. Ideas could now evolve faster than genes. Information could be stored outside bodies. Knowledge could accumulate across generations. And consciousness, that mysterious capacity for self-reflection, could begin its own unpredictable journey. The stage was set for everything that followed. Chapter 3. Dawn of the Thinking. Ape. 2 million years ago, Earth was a planet in transition. The climate was cooling. Vast ice sheets were expanding across the northern hemisphere. The African continent, where our story unfolds, was becoming drier, with forests giving way to mixed woodlands and open savannas. This changing landscape created both challenges and opportunities for the primates living there. Tree-dwelling species faced diminishing habitat. Those that ventured into open terrain encountered new predators and new food sources. Selection pressures were shifting, favoring adaptations for ground dwelling. Among these primates were several species of hominins, members of the human family that had already diverged from the lineage leading to modern chimpanzees and bonobos. They walked upright, though not exactly as we do. Their bodies were adapting to life on the ground. Their brains, while still much smaller than ours, were already larger relative to body size than those of other primates. Something was driving neural expansion, a process that would accelerate dramatically during the period we're exploring. But what was that something? The archaeological record from this time reveals a crucial development: increasingly sophisticated stone tools. The Oldowan tradition, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where they were first discovered, represents humanity's first technology: simple but effective cutting implements. These tools weren't merely sticks or naturally broken stones used opportunistically, as chimpanzees might use today. They were deliberately crafted following specific techniques that had to be learned and practiced. They required planning, precision, and conceptual understanding of how materials interact. The hands that crafted these tools were changing too. Fossil evidence shows evolving precision grip capabilities, the ability to hold objects between thumb and fingertips with fine motor control. This development created a feedback loop. Better hands enabled better tools, which favored better hands. But perhaps the most significant changes were occurring inside the skull. Brain organization was shifting, with areas devoted to manual dexterity, spatial reasoning, and social cognition expanding. Neural networks were becoming more complex, allowing for more sophisticated information processing. The fossil record from this period includes several hominin species that may have contributed to our story. Homo habilis, handyman, appears around 2.4 million years ago with a modestly enlarged brain. Homo erectus emerges closer to 2 million years ago with even greater cranial capacity. It's tempting to view these species as a neat evolutionary sequence leading directly to us. But paleoanthropology reveals a messier reality: multiple hominin species coexisting, competing, perhaps occasionally interbreeding. Our family tree is more accurately described as a tangled bush. What were these beings like? How did they experience their world? They lacked language as we know it, but likely communicated through vocalizations, gestures, and facial expressions. Their social structures probably resembled those of modern great apes, but with increasing complexity. They hunted small animals and scavenged larger kills. They gathered plant foods, tubers, fruits, nuts, requiring knowledge of seasonal availability and processing techniques. They needed to remember locations of water sources, avoid predators, and navigate territories spanning many miles. All of this required sophisticated cognitive mapping, the ability to hold mental representations of their environment and manipulate those representations to solve problems. This spatial intelligence was likely one of the first forms of abstract thinking to develop in our lineage. The daily life of these early humans would have been dominated by immediate concerns: finding food, avoiding danger, securing shelter, maintaining social bonds. But evidence suggests they were beginning to think beyond the immediate in ways no species had before. Some Oldowan tools appear to have been carried considerable distances from their stone sources, up to 10 kilometers in some cases. This indicates planning beyond immediate needs. These weren't just tools made on the spot for immediate use. They were created in anticipation of future requirements. This seemingly simple behavior represents a profound cognitive leap, the ability to mentally project into the future, to prepare for circumstances that don't yet exist. It suggests an expanding temporal consciousness, a mind beginning to break free from the eternal present of pure instinct. Similarly, these early humans were beginning to process foods in new ways, cutting meat from carcasses, breaking bones to extract marrow, perhaps using simple pounding tools to process tough plant materials. Each of these activities required multi-step thinking and delayed gratification. The environmental context for these developments was crucial. The spreading savannas created a selective landscape that favored intelligence in multiple ways. Open terrain made predator detection more important. Scattered food resources required better memory and planning. Heat management demanded new solutions. Climate records show that this period was characterized by increasing environmental variability, not just general cooling and drying, but more dramatic fluctuations between wet and dry seasons, between warmer and cooler periods. Adaptability became premium currency in the evolutionary marketplace. A species that could remember past conditions, learn from them, and apply that knowledge to new situations had an edge in this unstable world. Intelligence became a form of ecological flexibility, allowing one species to effectively inhabit multiple niches through behavioral adaptation rather than physical specialization. Social complexity was likely another driver of cognitive evolution. Living in groups offered protection and hunting advantages, but required sophisticated management of relationships. Tracking who had done what to whom, forming coalitions, resolving conflicts, all demanded significant mental processing. The social brain hypothesis suggests that navigating increasingly complex social landscapes was the primary driver of human cognitive evolution. Our ancestors needed to become mind readers of sorts, able to infer the intentions, knowledge, and emotions of others to successfully cooperate and compete. Evidence for this social complexity comes partly from studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups who maintain networks of reciprocity and alliance spanning dozens or even hundreds of individuals. Such networks require substantial cognitive resources to track and manage. Fire control may have emerged during this period, though the earliest definitive evidence comes slightly later. If early Homo erectus did harness fire, it would have profoundly impacted their cognitive development, providing safety from predators, warmth, and crucially, the ability to cook food. Cooked food yields more calories with less digestive effort, potentially fueling larger brains. Some anthropologists suggest a direct connection between cooking, nutrition, and the dramatic brain size increase that characterized human evolution. Softer cooked foods also reduced the need for large jaws and teeth. Around 1.8 million years ago, something remarkable happened. Homo erectus began to leave Africa, spreading into Asia and eventually Europe. This first human migration out of Africa suggests capabilities for adaptation to new environments that far exceeded those of any previous species. These migrants encountered new climates, new food sources, new predators, and new challenges. Their success across such varied environments indicates problem-solving abilities and cultural adaptations that could only come from increasingly sophisticated cognition. The stone tools they carried evolved too. Around 1.76 million years ago, the Acheulean tradition emerged, characterized by carefully shaped, teardrop-formed hand axes that required considerably more skill and planning to create than earlier Oldowan tools. These symmetric implements suggest new levels of conceptual thinking. Creating an Acheulean hand axe requires the toolmaker to hold in mind an abstract template, a mental image of the finished product, and work methodically toward that goal through dozens of precise strikes. This represents a significant leap in abstract thought and planning capacity. But the most provocative evidence from this period comes not from what we find, but from what we don't. Despite their expanding capabilities, these early humans left no clear evidence of symbolic thinking, no art, no decoration, no indications of ritual or religion that we can definitively identify. This absence highlights the profound transition still to come, the development of fully symbolic thought that would eventually lead to language, art, and the entire symbolic world we inhabit today. Our ancestors 2 million years ago stood at the threshold of this transformation, but had not yet crossed it. Chapter 4. The First Glimmers of Consciousness. The Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania stretches before us like a wound in the earth, layers of sediment revealing 2 million years of history. It was here in the early 1960s that Louis and Mary Leakey unearthed evidence that would fundamentally change our understanding of human origins. Among the fossils and stone tools, they discovered something remarkable: the remains of a juvenile Homo habilis alongside stone tools and animal bones bearing cut marks. This association suggested not just tool use, but a systematic approach to processing food. A mind at work. The tools themselves tell a compelling story. When examined microscopically, they show patterns of wear that indicate specific uses, some for cutting meat, others for processing plant materials, still others for breaking bones to extract nutritious marrow. These weren't random stones, but specialized implements. More telling still is how they were made. Experimental archaeology, where modern researchers recreate ancient tool-making techniques, reveals that creating even simple Oldowan tools requires understanding concepts like fracture mechanics. The toolmaker must select appropriate stone types and apply precise strikes. This knowledge was transmitted across generations. The consistency of tool-making techniques across wide geographical areas and time spans suggests intentional teaching and learning, a cultural transmission of knowledge that goes beyond the simple imitation seen in other primates. But perhaps the most intriguing evidence comes from studying the neurological demands of stone tool-making. Brain imaging of modern humans learning these ancient skills reveals activation in regions associated with abstract thinking, language processing, and complex problem-solving. When researchers taught chimpanzees to create similar tools, the apes could learn basic flaking techniques, but struggled with the conceptual understanding needed to consistently produce effective cutting edges. The cognitive gap becomes apparent in the execution. This suggests that even 2 million years ago, our ancestors possessed neural capacities that separated them from other primates. Not just in degree, but potentially in kind. Something fundamental was changing in how these minds processed information and solved problems. Further evidence comes from studying the brain endocasts of fossil skulls, the impressions left by the brain on the interior surface of the cranium. These show that Homo habilis and early Homo erectus already had expanded areas in regions associated with language and tool use. Particularly significant was the development of Broca's area, a region of the frontal lobe crucial for speech production in modern humans. Its expansion in early Homo species suggests that the neural foundations for language were being laid, even if full language had not yet emerged. The timing of these neurological changes correlates with another significant development, a shift in diet toward more animal protein. Cut marks on fossil bones indicate that early humans were butchering animals with their stone tools, accessing high-quality nutrition that may have fueled brain growth. Meat eating alone doesn't explain cognitive evolution. Other carnivores didn't develop comparable intelligence, but the social coordination required for successful scavenging or hunting, combined with the technical skills needed for processing carcasses, created a selection environment that favored enhanced cognition. There's also evidence that these early humans were traveling significant distances to obtain preferred stone materials for their tools. At sites in Kenya's Kagera South, researchers found tools made from rocks sourced from outcrops up to 13 kilometers away, deliberately selected for their superior qualities. This suggests an ability to plan ahead and make decisions based on abstract quality assessments rather than immediate utility, a level of forethought that goes beyond what we observe in even the most intelligent non-human animals today. Another crucial piece of evidence comes from the changing structure of hands. Fossil hand bones from this period show adaptations for both power grips, needed for wielding tools, and precision grips, needed for making them. The integration of strength and dexterity is quintessentially human. These evolving hands created new possibilities for interaction with the environment, and in doing so, may have reshaped the brain itself. Some researchers propose that the intricate nerve connections required for fine motor control created neural networks that could later be repurposed for language. Social evidence is harder to discern in the archaeological record, but living site arrangements suggest increasing complexity in group dynamics. Early Homo erectus sites sometimes show evidence of resource sharing and division of labor, hallmarks of enhanced social cognition. The ability to coordinate activities, share food, establish distinct roles, and maintain group cohesion across changing circumstances all require sophisticated social intelligence, the capacity to model other minds and predict behavior based on those models. By 1.8 million years ago, early humans had begun manufacturing more complex tools, the aforementioned Acheulean hand axes. These teardrop-shaped implements required removing flakes from both sides to create a sharp edge around the entire perimeter, a much more demanding process than creating Oldowan tools. What's particularly striking about Acheulean hand axes is their standardized form. They follow a template that remains remarkably consistent across vast geographical areas and hundreds of thousands of years. This standardization suggests not just learned skills, but shared mental concepts. Some of these hand axes show craftsmanship that goes beyond mere utility. They're made with a symmetry and refinement that suggests aesthetic considerations, perhaps the first stirrings of an artistic sensibility. Were their makers simply showing off their skills or beginning to find beauty in form? The environmental context of these cognitive developments is crucial. Climate records show that between 2.5 and 2 million years ago, Africa experienced increasing aridity and climatic variability. Our ancestors had to adapt to rapidly changing conditions, a situation that would have favored behavioral flexibility. Those who could learn quickly, remember solutions to past challenges and apply that knowledge to new situations would have had significant survival advantages. In this context, enhanced cognition wasn't just one adaptation among many. It was the master adaptation that enabled all others. Comparative evidence from modern primates adds another dimension to our understanding. Studies of chimpanzees reveal that they can use simple tools and even teach these skills to others. But they rarely combine tools or create multi-step solutions to problems, a cognitive limitation our ancestors clearly overcame. Experiments with captive bonobos who have been taught language show that they can understand and use symbols, but struggle with grammar and syntax. This suggests that while the foundations for symbolic thinking exist in our closest relatives, the full architecture of language required neural innovations. By examining what our closest living relatives can and cannot do cognitively, we can begin to identify the unique attributes that emerged during human evolution, the cognitive capacities that ultimately made us different. One of the most tantalizing questions remains: did these early humans have self-awareness? Did they recognize themselves as distinct entities with continuing identities through time? Did they contemplate their own thoughts? The archaeological record cannot directly answer these questions, but indirect evidence suggests the beginnings of self-conception. The planning required for tool transport and maintenance implies a sense of oneself extending into the future. The social coordination seen at early sites suggests awareness of one's role within a group. The most compelling evidence for emerging consciousness, however, may be the increasing distance between stimulus and response that we can infer from the archaeological record. Rather than simply reacting to immediate circumstances, early humans were preparing for anticipated future needs. This gap between perception and action, this pause where evaluation and decision-making occur, is where consciousness dwells. As this gap widened in our ancestors, the space for a sense of self expanded. The I that considers options and makes choices was taking form. But just as we begin to glimpse the awakening of the human mind in the archaeological record, we encounter a mystery that has puzzled researchers for decades. After the emergence of the Acheulean tradition around 1.76 million years ago, technological innovation seems to slow dramatically. For nearly 1 million years, stone tool technology remains remarkably static. Hand axes made by humans 700,000 years ago are virtually indistinguishable from those made 1 million years earlier. This Acheulean stasis raises profound questions about the cognitive development of our ancestors. Why did technological innovation plateau? Did biological evolution outpace cultural evolution? Were there limitations in how knowledge could be transmitted without fully developed language? Or had our ancestors simply found an optimal solution that required no further refinement? Whatever the explanation, this apparent cognitive plateau would eventually give way to an explosion of innovation. But that transition, perhaps the most significant in human cognitive evolution, remains shrouded in mystery. Something was still missing in the minds of these early toolmakers. What was that missing element? What cognitive capacity would eventually break the Acheulean stasis and launch our species on its extraordinary trajectory towards symbolic thought, art, architecture, writing, and eventually the complex civilization we inhabit today? The answer may lie in a development we've touched upon, but not fully explored: the emergence of language. Not just communication, which all social animals possess to some degree, but true language with grammar, syntax, and unlimited generative capacity. The fossil evidence hints at biological preparations for speech, changes in the vocal tract, expansion of language-associated brain regions. But when did these anatomical adaptations translate into actual language use? When did our ancestors first begin to name the world around them? And more importantly, when did they begin to use language not just to describe what is, but to imagine what could be? When did words become tools for constructing alternative realities, for building mental models that could be shared, contested, refined, and passed down through generations? This question brings us to the threshold of what may be the most significant transition in human cognitive evolution, the emergence of fully modern human consciousness, with its capacity for symbolic thought, imaginative projection, and cultural accumulation of knowledge. The evidence we've examined from 2 million years ago shows minds awakening to new possibilities, minds beginning to break free from the constraints of instinct and immediate perception. But the journey toward human consciousness had only just begun, and its most extraordinary chapters lay ahead. To be continued. Request chapters 5 out of 7. Chapter 5. The Missing Mental Links. The established narrative of human cognitive evolution suggests a steady, gradual progression from simple stone tools to complex symbolic thought, a neat linear trajectory from primitive to advanced. But this tidy story fractures when we look closer at the evidence. The Herculean hand axe tradition we discussed earlier presents our first major contradiction. These sophisticated tools emerge around 1.76 million years ago, representing a significant cognitive leap. Yet they then persist with minimal variation for over 1 million years, a puzzling technological stasis. Why would a species capable of such precise craftsmanship, clearly possessing planning abilities and abstract concept formation, suddenly stop innovating? This prolonged plateau doesn't match our understanding of how intelligence typically develops and expands once established. Modern research in developmental psychology shows that once certain cognitive thresholds are crossed, innovation tends to accelerate, not stagnate. Children who master symbolic representation quickly expand their conceptual universe. Why didn't this happen with our tool-making ancestors? One explanation might be the absence of language. Without words to codify and transmit complex ideas, technological knowledge could only be demonstrated, not explained. This would severely limit the accumulation and refinement of knowledge across generations. But this explanation creates another paradox. The anatomical prerequisites for speech, from vocal tract modifications to expanded language processing brain regions, were gradually evolving during this period. Why didn't language emerge alongside these biological adaptations? Even more puzzling is evidence suggesting that early Homo erectus may have crossed substantial bodies of water to reach islands in Southeast Asia. Sites in Flores and Sulawesi contain stone tools dated to over 1 million years ago. Yet these islands were never connected to the mainland. Such water crossings would require boats or rafts, technologies implying not just advanced planning, but genuine imagination, the ability to envision something that doesn't yet exist and bring it into being. This contradicts the image of cognitively limited early humans. If these early humans could conceptualize and build watercraft, they possessed capabilities far beyond what their stable, unchanging tool traditions suggest. It's as though there were two parallel stories of cognitive development, one visible in the stone tool record, another hidden from our view. Another anomaly appears in the fossil record itself. Brain size increased dramatically during this period, nearly doubling in the transition from early hominins to Homo erectus. Yet this rapid neural expansion doesn't correlate neatly with observable behavioral changes in the archaeological record. I'm curious, what do you think explains this mismatch between brain evolution and technological development? If you have a theory, drop it in the comments below. These puzzles have intrigued researchers for decades. Further contradictions emerge when we examine living sites from this period. Some show evidence of sophisticated spatial organization, designated areas for different activities, suggesting complex social coordination. Yet the material culture remains surprisingly simple. At sites like Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, dated to around 800,000 years ago, researchers found evidence of controlled fire use, systematic butchery of animals, and spatial organization of activities. These behaviors imply social rules, role specialization, and perhaps even symbolic communication. Yet the tools at this site, while skillfully made, don't differ significantly from those made hundreds of thousands of years earlier. The cognitive capabilities implied by the site organization seem mismatched with the technological conservatism of the tool traditions. This disconnect between social complexity and technological innovation challenges our models of how human cognition developed. Were our ancestors more focused on social innovation than material technology? Did cognitive advancement take place primarily in domains that leave no archaeological trace? The evidence for fire use presents another intriguing puzzle. Controlling fire requires sophisticated cognitive abilities, understanding cause and effect, maintaining attention over extended periods, and conceptualizing fire as both dangerous and beneficial. A complex, abstract categorization. Yet definitive evidence for controlled fire use appears sporadically in the archaeological record. Some sites show clear evidence, while contemporaneous sites nearby show none. This patchy distribution doesn't match what we'd expect from a transformative technology. If some groups mastered fire while others didn't, what does this tell us about the transmission of knowledge? Why wouldn't such a valuable adaptation spread rapidly? This irregular pattern suggests communication barriers or possibly even distinct cognitive capabilities among different populations. Perhaps most perplexing are the rare instances of what some archaeologists have termed precocious technology, isolated examples of advanced tools or techniques that appear long before they become common. These anomalies challenge our understanding of the pace of cognitive evolution. For example, at Kathu Pan in South Africa, researchers found what appear to be stone points designed for spears, dated to approximately 500,000 years ago, hundreds of thousands of years earlier than similar technologies appear elsewhere. Were some populations cognitively ahead of the curve? Similarly, there are disputed claims of symbolic markings on objects dating to this early period. Deliberate geometric engravings that serve no utilitarian purpose would suggest abstract symbolic thinking. But the interpretation of these marks remains contentious among archaeologists. If these markings are indeed symbolic expressions, they would dramatically alter our timeline for the emergence of abstract thought. But if they're not, why do objects that so strongly resemble later symbolic artifacts appear in much earlier contexts? The geographical distribution of cognitive advancements presents additional contradictions. Innovations don't spread evenly or predictably. Some populations adopt new technologies rapidly, while others maintain older traditions for millennia, despite apparent contact with more advanced groups. This pattern challenges simple progressive models of cognitive evolution. If all humans shared the same cognitive capacities, why would advantageous innovations spread so unevenly? Are we seeing cultural preferences rather than cognitive limitations? Or were there genuine differences in mental capabilities? These geographical inconsistencies become especially pronounced when we examine the transition from the lower to middle Paleolithic around 300,000 years ago. New tool-making techniques appear first in Africa, then gradually spread to Europe and Asia, but not uniformly. Some populations continued using Acheulean hand axes long after others had adopted more sophisticated Levallois techniques. This technological diversity suggests either cultural isolation or potentially different cognitive capacities among contemporaneous human populations. The emerging picture is far more complex than traditional narratives suggest. Rather than a smooth universal progression, we see a mosaic pattern of cognitive development, advancements appearing, disappearing, and reappearing in different times and places. This pattern better matches what we know about how evolution actually works, not as a linear march toward predetermined goals, but as a branching, experimenting process responding to local conditions. Cognitive abilities likely evolved in similar fashion, in starts and stops with regional variations. Perhaps the most significant anomaly is the apparent disconnect between biological and cultural evolution. Brain size reached essentially modern proportions with late Homo erectus and early Homo heidelbergensis around 500,000 years ago. Yet behavioral modernity took much longer to appear. If our ancestors had brains physically capable of modern cognition hundreds of thousands of years before they demonstrated behaviorally modern traits, what was the missing ingredient? What finally unlocked the potential that apparently lay dormant for millennia? Some researchers propose a cognitive mutation theory, suggesting that a genetic change around 50,000, 70,000 years ago suddenly enhanced neural connectivity or information processing, enabling modern abstract thought. But this theory has limited supporting evidence. Others argue that the capacity was always there, but cultural accumulation needed to reach a critical threshold before certain cognitive possibilities could emerge. In this view, the hardware was present long before the software evolved to fully utilize it. The renowned archaeologist Stephen Mithen proposed an intriguing alternative, that early human cognition was domain-specific. Our ancestors possessed advanced intelligence in particular domains, toolmaking, social navigation, natural history, but couldn't initially integrate these knowledge systems. According to this theory, what we call modern human consciousness emerged when these previously separate cognitive domains became fluidly interconnected, allowing knowledge from one area to inform and transform understanding in another. This cognitive fluidity enabled metaphor, art, and symbolic thought. This theory helps explain why our ancestors could be simultaneously sophisticated and limited, capable of remarkable achievements in specific domains while unable to make connections that seem obvious to modern minds. But what caused these cognitive walls to finally come down? Looking at all these contradictions and anomalies together, a picture emerges not of smooth progression, but of a species at a cognitive crossroads, possessing extraordinary potential, but constrained by limitations we're still working to understand. The established timeline suggests that fully modern cognition, with its capacity for symbolic thought, artistic expression, and technological innovation, emerged relatively recently, perhaps only in the last 100,000 years. But the contradictory evidence we've examined raises a provocative possibility. What if the capacity for advanced cognition appeared much earlier, but expressed itself differently than we expect? What if we're missing evidence of early intelligence because we're looking for it in the wrong places or through the wrong conceptual lens? Chapter 6. Whispers from the Ancestral Mind. Every culture has origin myths, stories that explain how humans gained knowledge, language, and consciousness. Remarkably, many of these myths share common elements despite emerging from widely separated societies with no apparent historical contact. The Prometheus myth tells of divine fire stolen and given to humanity, suddenly illuminating minds previously shrouded in animal-like existence. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories speak of ancestral beings imparting knowledge to the first humans. Mesopotamian traditions describe wisdom bestowed by fish-like creatures. These convergent narratives suggest a universal human intuition that consciousness arrived not gradually, but suddenly, as a gift or transformation. Could these myths preserve some dim cultural memory of a genuine cognitive revolution? Or do they simply reflect how consciousness appears in individual development? Modern neuroscience shows that children develop self-awareness around age 2, a seemingly sudden emergence of the recognition that they exist as distinct entities. Perhaps our cultural myths project this individual experience onto our species' history, imagining a similar awakening in our collective past. Yet some elements in these myths contain intriguing parallels to the archaeological evidence. Many traditions speak of fire as the catalyst for human awakening, echoing theories that cooking and fire management accelerated brain development and social complexity. Other myths emphasize language acquisition as the transformative moment, when sounds became words that could name and therefore control aspects of reality. This parallels linguistic theories that place symbolic language at the center of the human cognitive revolution. What makes these myths particularly interesting is their ubiquity. From Polynesia to Africa, from Native American traditions to ancient Chinese texts, we find recurring motifs of consciousness as something bestowed rather than gradually evolved, often by non-human entities or forces. These cross-cultural patterns raise an intriguing possibility. Could they preserve some genetic memory of a transformative cognitive event? Modern research into epigenetics suggests that significant experiences can affect how genes express themselves, potentially influencing subsequent generations. While strict Lamarckian inheritance of acquired characteristics has been discredited, trauma studies show that extreme experiences can produce epigenetic changes that affect descendants. Could the acquisition of full consciousness have been such a profound experience that it left epigenetic markers? This speculation ventures beyond conventional archaeological interpretation, but it offers a potential explanation for both the myths and the puzzling archaeological evidence. the seemingly sudden appearances of advanced behaviors, followed by long periods of stasis. Turning from myths to material evidence, we encounter another category of anomalies, what some researchers call out-of-place artifacts, or archaeological outliers. These are findings that don't fit neatly into the established timeline of human cognitive development. Have you ever wondered if there's evidence of advanced thinking from much earlier periods that mainstream science has overlooked? Share your thoughts on archaeological anomalies in the comments. I'm always fascinated by different perspectives on these mysteries. One such controversial finding comes from Bildungsleben in Germany. Dating to approximately 370,000 years ago, archaeologists discovered what appear to be intentionally engraved patterns on elephant bones. If confirmed as deliberate symbolic markings, these would predate other evidence of symbolic thinking by hundreds of thousands of years. Similarly, at the site of Berakat Ram in Israel, researchers found what some interpret as a deliberately modified piece of volcanic rock resembling a female figure, dated to between 250,000 and 280,000 years ago. If this is indeed an intentional representation, it would be the earliest known figurative art. These findings remain contentious precisely because they don't fit the established narrative of when symbolic thinking emerged. Skeptics suggest they represent natural processes or coincidental resemblances, while others argue they provide evidence that abstract thought appeared much earlier than commonly believed. The 2018 discovery of cave art in Spain, dated to 65,000 years ago, created when only Neanderthals inhabited Europe, forced a significant re-evaluation of cognitive capabilities in our closest relatives. If Neanderthals could create symbolic art, the cognitive differences between human species must be reconsidered. This finding suggests that the capacity for symbolic representation may have been present in the common ancestor of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, potentially pushing the emergence of this cognitive ability back to at least 500,000 years ago. Other anomalous evidence comes from studies of stone tool production techniques. Experiments show that creating Acheulean hand axes requires capabilities for mental rotation, working memory, and hierarchical planning comparable to those of modern humans. Yet these tools date to nearly 1.8 million years ago. The cognitive requirements for creating these tools seems mismatched with the conventional timeline for the emergence of advanced thinking. Either early humans possessed more sophisticated cognitive abilities than we've recognized, or these tools can be produced with simpler mental processes than experimental studies suggest. Perhaps most puzzling are certain examples of technological discontinuity. Advanced techniques or concepts that appear briefly in the archaeological record then disappear for millennia before re-emerging. These suggest that cognitive capabilities might have been present long before they became consistently expressed. For example, evidence of blade tool technology, a sophisticated method requiring precise planning and execution, appears occasionally in contexts dated to 500,000 years ago or earlier, then disappears only to become widespread after 40,000 years ago. What explains these apparent flashes of brilliance followed by regression? Recent genetic evidence adds another layer of complexity. Studies of ancient DNA reveal that interbreeding occurred between Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly other archaic human species. This genetic mixing raises profound questions about cognitive diversity among early human populations. If these different human species could recognize each other as potential mates despite hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution, they must have shared significant cognitive and behavioral traits. The boundaries between human species, both biological and cognitive, appear increasingly blurred. In 2019, researchers identified a protein in human brains linked to enhanced synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections. This protein, which differs between humans and other primates, may have emerged through genetic exchange with Denisovans. If correct, this finding suggests that some of our most distinctive cognitive adaptations may have come not through gradual modification within a single lineage, but through hybridization between different human species, each with their own cognitive adaptations to different environments. This hybridization model potentially explains both the mosaic pattern of cognitive evolution we observe in the archaeological record and the cultural myths of transformation through outside intervention. Genetic exchange between previously isolated populations could produce relatively sudden cognitive changes. Another category of anomalous evidence comes from linguistic studies. While language leaves no direct archaeological trace, comparative linguistics and studies of language acquisition offer insights into when and how humans developed this transformative capacity. Some linguists argue that all human languages share certain universal grammatical features that suggest a common origin, potentially dating to the emergence of Homo sapiens around 300,000 years ago or even earlier. Yet clear evidence of symbolic behavior appears much later in the archaeological record. This disconnect between presumed language capabilities and material evidence of symbolic thinking presents another puzzle. If early humans possessed language, why didn't they immediately use it to develop and transmit more complex technologies and symbolic systems? Studies of indigenous hunter-gatherer languages reveal extraordinary complexity and sophistication, some containing grammatical features more complex than those found in industrial societies' languages. This suggests that cognitive complexity can exist independently of technological advancement. Perhaps early humans directed their cognitive resources toward domains that leave minimal archaeological traces: complex social systems, elaborate mythologies, sophisticated classification systems for plants and animals. Their intelligence may have expressed itself in ways we struggle to detect. Ethnographic studies support this possibility. Many hunter-gatherer societies possess incredibly detailed ecological knowledge, complex kinship systems, and rich oral traditions, all powerful expressions of intelligence that would leave little or no trace in the archaeological record. When we combine these anomalous findings with the contradictions discussed earlier, the conventional narrative of human cognitive evolution begins to appear increasingly inadequate. The evidence points toward a more complex, non-linear development with multiple pathways and expressions. Rather than a single cognitive revolution, we may be seeing evidence of multiple cognitive transformations, some successful and perpetuated, others ephemeral and lost. The story of human consciousness may be less a steady march forward than a series of experiments, some fruitful, others abandoned. This perspective aligns with contemporary understanding of evolution as a process that doesn't necessarily produce optimal solutions, but rather workable adaptations to specific environmental contexts. As environments changed, different cognitive adaptations may have been favored or disfavored. The anomalies and contradictions we've examined don't disprove the established timeline of human cognitive evolution, but they do complicate it significantly. They suggest that the capacity for complex thought may have deep roots, manifesting in different ways across time and place. Perhaps most importantly, they remind us that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The archaeological record preserves only a fraction of past behaviors, and our interpretations are inevitably shaped by our modern conceptions of what intelligence looks like. As we continue to uncover new evidence and develop more sophisticated methods for analyzing it, our understanding of when and how human consciousness emerged will undoubtedly evolve. The story of human cognition remains very much a work in progress. Chapter 7: The Awakening That Changed Everything. The stakes of our investigation extend far beyond academic curiosity. Understanding when and how human consciousness emerged fundamentally shapes how we view ourselves, with other species, and even our future as a species. If modern human cognition emerged gradually over millions of years through conventional evolutionary processes, we might view consciousness as simply an elaboration of capacities present throughout the animal kingdom. A difference in degree rather than kind, positioning humans firmly within nature. But if consciousness represents a more dramatic discontinuity, whether through genetic mutation, hybridization between human species, or some emergent property of neural complexity, it suggests something more profound. Perhaps a genuine threshold was crossed, creating something qualitatively new in the universe. This distinction isn't merely philosophical. It influences how we think about animal cognition, artificial intelligence, and the likelihood of finding conscious beings elsewhere in the cosmos. It shapes our ethical frameworks and our sense of responsibility toward other thinking entities. The timing of this cognitive transition is equally consequential. If fully modern human consciousness emerged only recently, perhaps 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, as some theories suggest, then it represents an evolutionary experiment still in its earliest stages. This recent emergence would explain both our species' extraordinary success and our persistent struggles with technologies and social structures that may outpace our evolved cognitive adaptations. We would be, in effect, ancient minds navigating modern problems, with predictably mixed results. Conversely, if the capacity for advanced cognition has deeper roots, extending millions rather than thousands of years into our past, it suggests something more troubling. It would mean that our cognitive potential remained largely unexpressed for vast periods of time, activated only under specific circumstances. This latter possibility raises profound questions about our current cognitive state. Are we utilizing our full cognitive potential today? Or might there be capacities still dormant within us, awaiting the right conditions for expression? The stakes of this question could hardly be higher. Recent neuroscientific research adds urgency to these questions. Studies of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, reveal that neural structure and function are far more malleable than previously recognized. Our brains physically change in response to experience and training. This plasticity suggests that the hardware-software distinction we often apply to computers may be misleading when applied to minds. The hardware of our brains is constantly being reconfigured by the software of our experiences and cultural practices. If neural structure and cognitive capacity exist in this kind of dynamic relationship, then the expression of our cognitive potential depends not just on our genetic inheritance, but on our cultural environment. Different cultural contexts might activate or suppress different cognitive possibilities. This perspective helps explain one of the most striking features of human cognitive evolution: its apparent acceleration. As cultural complexity increased, it created selection pressures favoring enhanced cognitive abilities, which in turn enabled greater cultural complexity, a powerful feedback loop. But this feedback mechanism works both ways. Cultural practices can either enhance or restrict cognitive development. Some environments foster intellectual exploration and creative problem-solving. Others emphasize conformity and tradition. Both approaches have adaptive value in different contexts. This dynamic relationship between biology and culture dramatically raises the stakes of our investigation. If human cognitive potential is partially determined by cultural context, then understanding the conditions that sparked the initial cognitive transition becomes crucial for our future development. What if the emergence of human consciousness wasn't inevitable but contingent, dependent on a specific set of environmental, social, and technological circumstances? This would suggest that its continued expression and development might also be contingent rather than guaranteed. Consider how different the world might be if the cognitive transition we're investigating had never occurred. No art, no science, no philosophy, no technology beyond the most basic tools. The Earth would still be governed entirely by instinct rather than reflection. Or imagine if this transition had happened differently, perhaps emphasizing different cognitive capacities than those that actually evolved. What if spatial reasoning had developed more fully than verbal abilities, or emotional intelligence had outpaced analytical thinking? We might inhabit a radically different mental universe. These counterfactuals highlight what's at stake in our exploration. We're not just investigating an ancient transformation, we're studying the very conditions that made our form of consciousness possible, conditions that might inform its future development. I'm truly curious, what aspect of human consciousness do you think most separates us from other animals? Is it language, imagination, self-awareness, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. The evidence we've examined suggests that the transition to human-like consciousness wasn't a single event but a process with multiple components: enhanced working memory, theory of mind, symbolic representation, language, metacognition. Each represented a significant cognitive threshold. But these components didn't necessarily develop simultaneously or at a constant rate. The archaeological record shows periods of apparent stasis punctuated by bursts of innovation, suggesting that certain cognitive capabilities may have emerged relatively suddenly when conditions were right. This pattern resembles what complexity theorists call emergent phenomena, where systems reorganize at critical thresholds to produce qualitatively new properties. Consciousness may represent such an emergent property, arising when neural complexity reached a critical level. If consciousness is indeed an emergent phenomenon, it suggests something remarkable, that the whole of human awareness is greater than the sum of its neural parts. That subjectivity itself, the feeling of being someone, may be an irreducible property that appears at certain levels of complexity. This perspective transforms the stakes of our investigation from historical curiosity to existential inquiry. We're not merely tracing when our ancestors developed certain cognitive skills. We're exploring how awareness itself emerged in the universe. Recent developments in artificial intelligence add another dimension to these stakes. As we create increasingly sophisticated AI systems, questions about the nature and origins of consciousness take on immediate practical significance. Could we create another form of conscious intelligence? If consciousness emerged gradually through natural selection, we might expect it to develop similarly in artificial systems as they grow more complex. But if consciousness required specific evolutionary pathways or biological structures, artificial systems might increase in capability without ever becoming conscious. Alternatively, if consciousness represents an emergent property of sufficient complexity and self-reference, AI systems might eventually cross the same threshold our ancestors did 2 million years ago, creating a new form of awareness with unpredictable consequences. These possibilities underscore why understanding the original emergence of consciousness matters so profoundly. The pattern of that first transition might inform our expectations about potential future transitions, whether in artificial systems we create or in our own continuing cognitive evolution. But perhaps the most significant stakes concern our relationship with our own minds. If consciousness emerged as adaptation to specific environmental challenges, it represents a tool shaped for survival rather than truth-seeking, raising questions about its reliability as a guide to reality. Cognitive scientists have documented numerous systematic biases in human thought, from confirmation bias to the fundamental attribution error. These don't appear to be bugs, but features, adaptations that promoted survival in ancestral environments, even at the expense of accuracy. This evolutionary perspective on consciousness suggests both humility and potential. Humility because it reveals the limitations and biases built into our thinking. Potential because understanding these constraints creates possibilities for transcending them through cultural tools like science. The timeline of cognitive evolution we're investigating also has implications for how we understand consciousness itself. If it emerged gradually over millions of years, consciousness likely exists on a continuum rather than as a binary property, with profound ethical implications for how we treat other species. If other animals possess proto-conscious experiences qualitatively similar to our own, albeit simpler or less integrated, this would demand reconsideration of our moral responsibilities toward them. The stakes extend beyond humans to all sentient beings. Returning to the archaeological evidence, we can now see why resolving the contradictions and anomalies matters so deeply. Each competing interpretation of the evidence implies a different understanding of consciousness, its nature, its uniqueness, its future possibilities. If early tool technologies like the Acheulean hand axe truly required mental capacities comparable to our own, it suggests that consciousness as we know it has existed for nearly 2 million years, making it a fundamental and enduring feature of our lineage. But if these technologies could be produced through simpler cognitive processes, with true human-like consciousness emerging much later, it suggests something more provisional and perhaps more fragile, a recent innovation still finding its footing. The contradictory evidence we've examined may itself be telling us something profound, that consciousness isn't a single phenomenon, but a collection of capacities that evolved at different rates and times. Some aspects may indeed date back millions of years, while others emerged only recently. This mosaic model of cognitive evolution raises the stakes further by suggesting that consciousness remains a work in progress, not a completed adaptation, but an ongoing process of development, one that continues to unfold in our brains and in our cultures. If consciousness is indeed still evolving, the question becomes not just when it began, but where it's heading. Are we in the early, middle, or late stages of cognitive evolution? What might the next thresholds be, and how might crossing them transform our experience of being human? Some theorists suggest that cultural developments like writing, mathematics, and digital technology represent cognitive extensions comparable in significance to the biological adaptations we've been discussing. If so, human consciousness continues to undergo revolutionary changes. Others point to practices like meditation, which research shows can alter brain structure and function in ways that enhance attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. These traditions might represent deliberate efforts to advance cognitive evolution through cultural rather than biological means. These possibilities suggest that the story we're exploring isn't just about our past, but about our future. Understanding how consciousness first emerged might provide insights into how it could further develop, whether through technological augmentation, cultural practice, biological evolution. As we prepare to examine the most compelling evidence for when the transition to human-like consciousness occurred, the stakes of our investigation should be clear. We're not merely dating an ancient event, but exploring the very foundations of what makes us human. The emergence of consciousness represents perhaps the most consequential transition in the history of life on Earth. The moment when the universe became aware of itself through the awakening of minds capable of contemplating their own existence and the nature of reality itself. If we can understand when and how this transition occurred, we might gain insight into consciousness itself, its nature, its potential, and perhaps even its purpose. The story of human awakening may be not just our past, but a glimpse of greater awakenings yet to come. Then Chapter 8, A Mind's Dawn, 3 Paths to Consciousness. As we approach the heart of our investigation, 3 competing theories emerge to explain when and how human consciousness first awakened. Each theory draws on substantial evidence, yet each places the critical transition at a different point in our evolutionary history. The first theory, which we might call the deep roots hypothesis, argues that consciousness emerged gradually over millions of years, with its foundations dating back to our earliest tool-making ancestors, around 2 million years ago, or even earlier. According to this view, the cognitive requirements for creating even the simplest stone tools already represented a significant departure from purely instinctual behavior. The gap between stimulus and response was widening, creating space for something we might recognize as proto-consciousness. Proponents point to the planning required for early Oldowan tool-making, the need to select appropriate stone types, anticipate how they would fracture, and execute precise strikes. These activities suggest mental simulation and future-oriented thinking, hallmarks of conscious awareness. Neuroimaging studies support this perspective. When modern humans learn ancient tool-making techniques, brain regions associated with language and abstract thinking activate, suggesting that these cognitive domains may have co-evolved with manual skills. The deep roots theory gains further support from comparative studies of great ape cognition. Chimpanzees demonstrate self-awareness, rudimentary theory of mind, and simple cultural transmission of knowledge. If our closest relatives possess these capabilities, their foundations likely predate our evolutionary divergence. Under this view, consciousness didn't suddenly appear but gradually expanded, from basic awareness to self-recognition to abstract thought, driven by the selective advantages of enhanced cognition in increasingly complex social groups navigating challenging environments. The archaeological evidence for this theory includes not just tools, but site organization patterns suggesting planning and social coordination. Some early Homo erectus sites show distinct activity areas, suggesting conceptual organization of space, an externalization of internal cognitive categories. If the deep roots theory is correct, consciousness is not a recent innovation, but a fundamental adaptation of our lineage, refined and elaborated over millions of years. Our awareness would be as much a part of our evolutionary heritage as our bipedal locomotion. The implications are profound. Consciousness would not be a fragile anomaly or recent experiment, but a robust adaptation thoroughly integrated into our biology. This would suggest both its stability and its limitations, shaped by evolutionary constraints rather than abstract principles. The second major theory, the cultural origins hypothesis, places the emergence of human consciousness much later, around 100,000 to 70,000 years ago, coinciding with the appearance of unambiguous symbolic behavior in the archaeological record. This perspective argues that while earlier humans possessed sophisticated cognitive abilities, true consciousness, with its hallmarks of symbolic thinking, imagination, and self-narration, required the catalyst of complex language and cultural frameworks. The evidence for this theory includes the sudden proliferation of symbolic artifacts beginning around 70,000 years ago, including engraved ochre, shell beads, and eventually cave art. These items had no clear utilitarian function, but appear to have carried meaning, the essence of symbolic thought. According to this view, consciousness as we experience it requires not just neural hardware, but cultural software, shared symbolic systems that structure perception and thought. The archaeological record suggests these systems developed relatively recently in our evolutionary history. The cultural origins theory points to the remarkably stable technology that preceded this symbolic explosion. For hundreds of thousands of years, stone tool traditions remained largely unchanged, suggesting cognition fundamentally different from our own, despite anatomical similarities. What changed? Proponents suggest a cultural rather than biological shift, perhaps the development of fully grammatical language that allowed abstract concepts to be communicated and refined across generations. Language would have created a new kind of mental space. This theory finds support in developmental psychology. Children acquire consciousness alongside language, learning to narrate their experiences and construct their identity through cultural frameworks. Individual development might recapitulate species development in this regard. If consciousness emerged through this cultural pathway, it would be less a biological adaptation than an emergent property of social interaction, making it potentially more malleable but also more dependent on cultural transmission for its continuation and development. The implications would be equally profound, but different. Consciousness would be understood as partly independent from our biology, a cultural invention that could potentially take different forms in different contexts, rather than a fixed product of natural selection. The third major theory, the genetic spark hypothesis, suggests that a specific genetic change around 50,000 years ago enhanced neural connectivity or information processing in a way that suddenly enabled modern human consciousness. This theory points to the apparent suddenness of behavioral modernity in the archaeological record. The rapid emergence of complex technologies, art, and eventual civilization following a long period of relative stability. Such discontinuity suggests a fundamental neural reorganization. Proponents note that small genetic changes affecting brain development could have outsized effects on cognition. Modern research has identified several genes that differ between humans and other primates, affecting neural development and potentially creating the substrate for enhanced consciousness. The FOXP2 gene involved in language processing shows evidence of recent selection in humans. The microcephalin and ASPM genes, which influence brain size, also show signatures of recent evolution. Such genetic changes could have crossed a critical threshold for conscious awareness. Interbreeding with other human species may have played a role in this genetic shift. Recent evidence confirms that Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, potentially acquiring genetic variants that affected neural function and cognitive capabilities. What makes this theory compelling is its explanatory power for the apparent cognitive explosion visible in the archaeological record. If consciousness resulted from genetic changes that spread through the population, it would explain the relatively sudden emergence of modern behaviors. The genetic evidence is suggestive, but not conclusive. While we've identified genes that differ between humans and other primates, directly linking these genetic changes to specific cognitive capabilities remains challenging. The relationship between genes and consciousness is undoubtedly complex. If this theory is correct, consciousness represents a genuine evolutionary innovation, a qualitative shift in cognition rather than a gradual elaboration of existing capabilities. It would be both more recent and more revolutionary than the other theories suggest. The implications would point toward consciousness as a specific adaptation rather than an inevitable outcome of intelligence. It might be uniquely human rather than a more general property of sufficiently complex brains, with significant implications for our understanding of animal minds and artificial intelligence. These three theories, deep roots, cultural origins, and genetic spark, represent the primary frameworks for understanding when instinct became intelligence. Each draws on legitimate evidence, and each has prominent supporters among researchers. What makes this question so challenging is that consciousness leaves no direct fossil record. We can examine stone tools, art objects, and fossil skulls, but we cannot directly observe the subjective experiences of our ancestors. We must infer consciousness from its material products. This limitation forces us to consider how we define consciousness itself. Is it awareness, self-recognition, symbolic thought, the capacity for language? Our answer to the when question depends crucially on what we consider the essential features of being conscious. Perhaps most intriguing is the possibility that all three theories capture different aspects of a complex reality. Consciousness may have deep evolutionary roots, undergone significant cultural elaboration, and experienced genetic enhancements at various points in our history. This integrative perspective suggests a multi-stage process. With foundational capacities for awareness emerging over millions of years, cultural frameworks shaping these capacities into proto-consciousness, and specific genetic adaptations eventually enabling the full flowering of human consciousness. Under this view, consciousness would be neither entirely biological nor entirely cultural, but a hybrid phenomenon emerging from the interaction of genetic predispositions, neural organization, bodily experience, and cultural frameworks, all evolving together in a complex dance. As we weigh these competing theories, we must consider not just the archaeological and genetic evidence, but also insights from neuroscience, developmental psychology, and philosophical investigations of consciousness. The full picture requires an interdisciplinary approach. What becomes clear is that the transition from instinct to intelligence wasn't a single event, but a process, one that may still be unfolding. Understanding when and how this process began illuminates not just our past, but potentially our future as a conscious species. Chapter 9. The Paradoxes of Primordial Thought. Recent scientific discoveries have complicated our understanding of early human cognition in ways that both clarify and deepen the mystery. New dating techniques, genetic analyses, and archaeological findings have revealed a picture far more complex than previously imagined. In 2018, stone tools discovered in Algeria were dated to 2.4 million years ago, 200,000 years older than any previously known tools in North Africa. This finding challenged established narratives about where and when tool use originated, suggesting multiple independent inventions. Similarly, evidence from Liangbua Cave in Indonesia revealed that Homo floresiensis, the diminutive hobbit species with brains roughly the size of chimpanzees, crafted sophisticated stone tools despite their limited cranial capacity. This finding fundamentally challenges assumptions about brain size and cognitive ability. These discoveries expose our first major paradox. The relationship between brain size and cognitive capability appears far more complex than a simple correlation. Some smaller brain species demonstrated technical abilities previously thought to require larger brains. This paradox extends to Neanderthals, who had slightly larger brains than Homo sapiens, yet were traditionally considered less cognitively advanced. Recent discoveries have forced a re-evaluation, revealing sophisticated behaviors including cave art, symbolic ornaments, and complex technologies. The emerging picture suggests that brain organization, the connectivity and efficiency of neural networks, may matter more than raw size. Different human species may have evolved different cognitive architectures, each with their own strengths and limitations. Advanced brain imaging studies of modern humans performing ancient tool-making tasks reveal that neural recruitment patterns differ substantially between techniques. Older one tool-making activates motor regions, while Acheulean tool-making additionally engages regions associated with language and planning. These findings suggest that increasingly sophisticated tool traditions may have both required and helped develop increasingly complex neural networks, creating a feedback loop between manual skill and cognitive development that drove human brain evolution. Genetic research has revealed another fascinating paradox. While the human lineage shows evidence of strong selection for genes affecting brain development, many of these genes appear to regulate the timing of development rather than introducing entirely new neural structures. This suggests that human cognition may have emerged largely through neoteny, the retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood. By extending childhood brain development periods, evolution may have allowed for more complex neural connectivity to develop before maturation was complete. If you've stayed with us this far, I'd love to know what you find most surprising about early human intelligence. Drop your thoughts in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how these ancient mysteries resonate with different people. This developmental perspective illuminates another paradox. Consciousness may be both very old and very new. The foundational neural capacities might stretch back millions of years, while their full expression in symbolic thought may be much more recent. Recent studies of great ape cognition further complicate the picture. Chimpanzees demonstrate capabilities previously thought uniquely human, including rudimentary symbolic communication, tool creation, cultural transmission of knowledge, and even limited forms of theory of mind. These findings suggest that the cognitive gap between humans and our closest relatives may be narrower than previously thought, implying that the foundations for human consciousness likely predate our evolutionary divergence from the great ape lineage. Yet paradoxically, despite these continuities, something qualitatively different clearly emerged in human cognition. While chimpanzees can learn hundreds of symbols, they never spontaneously develop symbolic systems comparable to human language. What accounts for this threshold effect? Neurological studies offer intriguing clues. The human brain shows enhanced connectivity between regions that remain relatively isolated in other primates, particularly between areas processing sensory information and those handling abstract conceptualization. This increased neural integration might explain the distinctive human capacity for metaphor, the ability to understand one domain in terms of another, which some cognitive scientists consider fundamental to abstract thought and symbolic consciousness. Archaeological evidence suggests that this integrative capacity emerged gradually. The earliest stone tools demonstrate practical problem-solving, while later artifacts increasingly show evidence of aesthetic considerations and eventually symbolic meaning, suggesting the progressive integration of previously separate domains. Another paradox emerges when we consider social cognition. Theory of mind, the ability to understand others' mental states, appears fundamental to human consciousness, yet shows evidence of evolutionary continuity with other primates who demonstrate more limited versions of this capability. Recent research with children suggests that theory of mind develops in stages, with the most sophisticated understanding emerging only around age 4. This developmental sequence might recapitulate evolutionary stages in the emergence of social awareness in our lineage. The archaeological record provides tantalizing hints of evolving social cognition. Early burial practices, emerging around 100,000 years ago, suggest awareness of mortality and possibly belief in some form of afterlife, concepts requiring sophisticated theory of mind. Care for injured or disabled group members, evidenced by healed injuries in fossil specimens, suggests empathy and social support systems dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Such care would have required understanding others' pain and needs, hallmarks of social consciousness. Perhaps the most profound paradox concerns the relationship between language and consciousness. Did language create consciousness, or did consciousness create language? The evidence suggests a complex, co-evolutionary relationship rather than a simple causal sequence. Brain imaging studies reveal that language processing and inner speech utilize many of the same neural circuits. This suggests that our internal monologue, often considered central to conscious experience, may have co-evolved with external communication systems. Comparative studies of brain anatomy show that areas crucial for language in humans have precursors in other primates, but with significantly different connectivity patterns. The neural foundations were present before language, but were repurposed and enhanced during human evolution. Archaeological evidence for language origins remains circumstantial but suggestive. Complex technologies requiring demonstration and instruction, evidence of long-distance trade, and eventually symbolic art, all imply communication systems of increasing sophistication. The hyoid bone, crucial for human speech production, appears in anatomically modern form in fossils dating to at least 60,000 years ago, and with near-modern characteristics in Neanderthals and earlier human species. The physical capacity for speech predates clear evidence of symbolic culture. This mismatch between anatomical capability and archaeological evidence of symbolic behavior creates another paradox. Our ancestors may have possessed the physical equipment for language before they had fully developed the cognitive frameworks needed to create symbolic systems. The mystery deepens when we consider the FOXP2 gene, sometimes called the language gene. Humans carry a unique variant of this gene crucial for language acquisition and articulation. Yet this variant appears to have reached fixation in our lineage around 200,000 years ago, long before evidence of symbolic culture. What were our anatomically modern ancestors doing with language-ready brains and vocal anatomy before they began producing symbolic artifacts? Did they possess language without symbolic thought, or symbolic thought without material expression? Either possibility challenges our understanding of consciousness. The newest frontier in understanding ancient cognition comes from paleoproteomics, the study of ancient proteins preserved in fossils. This emerging field has begun to identify proteins involved in brain development and function in ancient human species. Preliminary findings suggest subtle but significant differences in proteins affecting neural development between human species. Differences that may have influenced cognitive capacities in ways not evident from skeletal anatomy alone. These molecular differences might help explain cognitive variations between similar-looking human species. Taken together, these scientific advances present us with a paradoxical picture of early human consciousness, showing both more continuity with animal cognition and more variation within the human lineage than traditional narratives suggested. Rather than a single linear progression from instinct to intelligence, we see a complex mosaic of cognitive entities evolving at different rates in different populations, sometimes emerging, sometimes disappearing, sometimes being reinvented in response to specific environmental and social pressures. This complexity forces us to reconsider fundamental questions about consciousness itself. Is it a unitary phenomenon or a collection of capacities? Does it exist on a continuum or represent a genuine threshold? Is it primarily biological or substantially cultural? The answers to these questions aren't merely academic. They shape how we understand our place in nature, our relationship to other species, and ultimately the nature and potential of our own minds, both individually and collectively. As we prepare to synthesize this complex evidence into a coherent understanding of when instinct truly became intelligence, we must hold these paradoxes in mind, not as obstacles to understanding, but as the very texture of the phenomenon we're trying to comprehend. Chapter 10, The Dawn of Human Thought. After examining competing theories and scientific paradoxes, we arrive at the moment of synthesis, an understanding of when and how human consciousness actually emerged. The evidence, taken as a whole, points toward a conclusion both surprising and profound. Human consciousness did not emerge at a single moment in our evolutionary history. It was neither a sudden genetic mutation nor a gradual, continuous development. Instead, it appeared through a complex, multi-stage process spanning millions of years, with several crucial thresholds. The first threshold was crossed roughly 2 million years ago with the emergence of Homo habilis and early stone tool technologies. This represented not consciousness itself, but its necessary foundation, what we might call enhanced awareness or expanded working memory. The neural changes occurring during this period created the cognitive space where consciousness could eventually develop. The gap between stimulus and response widened, allowing for rudimentary planning, tool conceptualization, and expanded social awareness. Brain size increased dramatically during this period, but more importantly, neural organization began to change. Areas processing sensory information, motor control, and memory became more interconnected, allowing for more complex integration of experience. This foundation-building period lasted nearly 1 million years, with gradual elaboration of these basic capacities. Our ancestors weren't yet conscious in the modern sense, but they had developed the neural architecture that would eventually support consciousness. The second threshold was crossed with the emergence of Homo erectus around 1.8 million years ago. These more advanced hominins demonstrated not just enhanced awareness, but what we might call operational intelligence, the ability to conceptualize complex sequences of actions toward specific goals. The evidence for this transition appears in their sophisticated Herculean tool traditions, control of fire, expansion into diverse environments, and complex hunting strategies. These behaviors required mental simulation, the ability to run scenarios in the mind before acting in the world. This operational intelligence represented a significant step toward consciousness, but still lacked its defining feature: symbolic self-awareness. These ancestors could think about the world and act intelligently within it, but likely couldn't yet think about their own thinking. The third and perhaps most significant threshold was crossed with the emergence of early Homo sapiens and similar species like Neanderthals, beginning around 300,000 to 200,000 years ago. This period saw the development of what we might call social consciousness. Evidence for this transition comes from increasingly complex social behaviors, including ritual burial of the dead, long-distance trade networks, and care for injured group members. These activities suggest awareness of others as conscious beings with their own perspectives. Crucially, the genetic changes associated with language, including the human variant of FOXP2, were becoming established during this period. The neural and anatomical foundations for symbolic communication were falling into place. Yet paradoxically, despite these developments, the archaeological record shows limited evidence of symbolic expression during this period. Our ancestors had language-ready brains, but weren't yet producing unambiguous symbolic artifacts. Something was still missing. The final threshold, what we might call symbolic consciousness, appears to have emerged around 70,000 to 50,000 years ago. This transition is marked by the sudden proliferation of symbolic artifacts, including jewelry, engraved objects, pigment processing, and eventually representational art. What changed? The evidence suggests not a genetic mutation but a cultural breakthrough, the development of fully symbolic language and the shared conceptual frameworks it enabled. Ideas could now be externalized, shared, refined, and transmitted with unprecedented precision. This cultural innovation created a new kind of mental space, one populated not just by perceptions and memories, but by abstract concepts that could be manipulated symbolically. Consciousness as we experience it today, with its inner monologue and narrative self, was finally complete. The remarkable aspect of this final transition is that it required no significant change in brain anatomy. The neural hardware was already in place. What changed was the software, the cultural systems that allowed that hardware to function in a new way. This explains one of the most puzzling aspects of human evolution: the substantial gap between the emergence of anatomically modern humans around 200,000 years ago and the appearance of behaviorally modern humans much later. The hardware evolved before the software that would ultimately run on it. What makes this conclusion so profound is that it resolves the apparent contradictions in the archaeological record. The cognitive capacities underlying consciousness evolved gradually over millions of years, but consciousness itself emerged through distinct transitional thresholds. This model also explains why consciousness appears both continuous with animal cognition in some ways, yet qualitatively different in others. The foundations are evolutionary and shared with other species, But the full structure includes cultural components unique to humans. Perhaps most significantly, this understanding of consciousness as a biocultural hybrid, neither purely biological nor purely cultural, but emerging from their interaction, explains why consciousness can vary across human societies while maintaining certain universal features. The evidence reveals that consciousness is not a single adaptation, but a complex, emergent phenomenon with multiple components evolving at different rates. Some aspects were established millions of years ago, while others continue to develop and change through cultural evolution. This conclusion has profound implications. It suggests that consciousness is neither a happy accident nor an inevitable outcome, but the product of specific evolutionary pressures combined with cultural innovations. Different conditions might have produced different forms of awareness. It also suggests that consciousness continues to evolve, not through biological mutation, but through cultural development. New technologies, new social structures, and new ideas literally change how we experience being conscious by altering the cultural frameworks through which we interpret experience. From this perspective, the transition from instinct to intelligence wasn't completed 50,000 years ago. It continues today and into the future. Our consciousness is still evolving as we create new symbolic systems and new technologies that extend and transform our cognitive capabilities. What began 2 million years ago with the first deliberate shaping of stone tools continues today with the development of artificial intelligence, virtual realities, and other technologies that may fundamentally reshape what it means to be conscious in the coming decades and centuries. The great revelation of our journey is that consciousness isn't something we have. It's something we do, a process rather than a property, an ongoing, dynamic interaction between our evolved neural architecture and the cultural systems we collectively create and inhabit. This understanding transforms how we view not just our evolutionary past, but our potential future. If consciousness emerges from the interaction of biology and culture, then its continued development depends on both our genetic heritage and our cultural choices. The story of when instinct became intelligence is ultimately the story of how we became human, not through a single miraculous change, but through a long, complex process of biological and cultural coevolution that continues to unfold in each of our lives and in our collective journey as a species. In this light, the emergence of human consciousness represents not just a historical transition, but an ongoing project, one in which each generation participates through its contributions to our ever-evolving cultural systems and understanding of ourselves as conscious beings. As we conclude our journey through the dawn of human consciousness, we return to the African savanna, where our story began, that ancient landscape where our ancestors first lifted stone tools in hands increasingly capable of precision and purpose. 2 million years separate us from those early hominins, yet we remain connected by an unbroken thread of evolving awareness, from enhanced perception to operational intelligence, to social consciousness to symbolic thought, each building upon what came before. The transition from instinct to intelligence wasn't a single event, but a process with multiple thresholds, a symphony of cognitive evolution still being composed. What we call consciousness emerged gradually over millennia, yet paradoxically appeared suddenly with each threshold crossed. What makes this story so compelling is that we aren't merely its narrators, but its continuation. The same process that transformed our ancestors' minds continues to shape our own, not through genetic change, but through cultural evolution and technological extension of our cognitive capabilities. Perhaps the most profound insight from our investigation is that consciousness itself is unfinished, not a fixed property of our species, but a dynamic process still unfolding. Today's consciousness differs from that of our ancestors, and tomorrow's may differ from our own. This perspective invites both humility and possibility. Humility in recognizing that our way of being conscious represents just one manifestation of awareness among many possible forms. Possibility in understanding that the evolution of consciousness continues through our collective choices and creations. The story of human consciousness is simultaneously ancient and new, stretching back millions of years, yet continuing to develop with each generation. We are the inheritors of this extraordinary evolutionary journey and the authors of its next chapters. As we contemplate the awakening of the human mind across the vast expanse of evolutionary time, we might wonder what new thresholds of consciousness await us. What transformations in awareness might emerge from the cultural and technological systems we're creating today. If you found this exploration of our cognitive origins enlightening, subscribe to our channel for more journeys through the mysteries of human consciousness. Together, we'll continue exploring the extraordinary story of how we became the thinking species and what we might yet become.